Well, you don't have to be a farmer to know that the sower in our gospel lesson today is not utilizing the best agricultural practices, right? What a waste of seed, right? What a waste of time and energy we see from this sower. I wonder how many times you've heard or read this parable, and how many times you immediately begin thinking about what you're doing wrong. What spiritual practice do you need to add to your life to be that seed tossed on fertile ground? What place are you falling short in your relationship with God that isn't producing what it should? And what drastic change do you need to make in your life to right the wrong? At least that is often where we land when we read this passage. Or maybe in a more global sense, do you read this passage and wonder what we're doing wrong as a church? Have we invested in the right seeds, the right fertilizers, the right weed killers? Have we planted in the right place in order to achieve the results that we really desire? When our strategic plan has a goal of doubling membership and that doesn't happen, how often do we wonder what we're doing wrong? Maybe more neighborhood canvases are needed, maybe more door knocking, more programs, more events to the rescue, or not. So it's easy to hear this passage and feel really bad about ourselves, isn't it? The truth is, parables like this one really create more mystery than they reveal. In fact, it was so troublesome that at some point, somebody added a little explanation to those last verses that we heard today. 18 through 23 were not part of the earliest text. Somebody came along and added them later to explain, to interpret it through their own lenses and life experience. And it seems to me to maybe even to push this parable in a particular direction away from its original intention. I think that it does make a difference for us sitting here in 2026 trying to understand this scripture. Because with all that little description, we fall deeper into wondering if our roots are really deep enough. If we are actually receiving in joy, or if we're some of those who are there a while but then fall away. We are wondering if the lure of the world uproots us, and then, oh my, if we have to hear and understand to bear fruit and yield, then I don't know about you, but I'm in trouble if I have to really understand every little point. I once heard somebody give thanks that this parable isn't actually called the parable of the landscape, as we want to make it. This parable isn't about the ground. It's not about the rocks or the soil. It's not about whether it rains or scorches. It's not about what type of seed. And that's where we get it wrong when we go to Scripture. We put all of our stuff into reading rather than really hearing the intended good news. So listen with me to the text as it was intended originally, or at least the earliest intention, without that last little bit. Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, and while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground where they didn't have much soil, and they sprang up quickly since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on some good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let everyone with ears listen." Now, this parable is not about the ground, and it's not about the seeds. It's about the sower. And we know that. We call it that, and yet we ignore the actions of the sower and instead make it about ourselves. And when we do that, we miss the grace that is the central piece of this story. Picture it with me for a moment. The sower runs around just throwing the seeds, just flinging them everywhere. Not worrying about which place is better, which ground is more deserving. Just like handfuls, throwing them, spilling out, maybe even, I imagine, holes in pockets, just flinging them everywhere. Maybe the seeds pile up and the birds get them. Maybe they land on the rocks where they just scatter more. Maybe they land in the soil. Maybe they land and somebody comes and kicks them around with their feet. Maybe animals come and move them around and eat them and carry them as well. Now imagine that sower running through this neighborhood, down the street, everywhere, into our backyards, into school playgrounds and parking lots, down alleys, through every part of the town. Why in the world would the sower do this? Because there is enough to go around, and there's even enough to not worry, to even waste a little, even make a little mess. How often do we distrust that there's enough to go around, enough money, enough time, enough energy, enough love, enough grace? How often do we hoard it for ourselves or even think that we are wasting our time? And the truth is that some of the things that we do will not produce what we imagined. Not all of the seeds will grow, but some will. And if we choose only certain seeds in certain places, we are making choices that are not ours to make. We are holding on to things that we are not to hold on to. We are making decisions and giving answers for others that are not ours to give. And this is where we are invited to make a choice. Because we could choose to only till and work our soil, only to make our soil ready. But the truth is, even if we do that, we may be preparing the soil for a seed that won't even grow anyway. What if instead we were like that sower, joyfully skipping down the aisle of our sanctuary and into our city, scattering seeds indiscriminately? What if we opened our arms as wide as they could go? What if the world saw us as offering grace without being at all stingy, without worrying? What if we looked at the world around us with awe as the seeds of love and of justice and of hope and of grace just like fell through our fingers? What if those seeds made it to just the people and the places that needed it the most? Those who have nothing left but a little hope to hang on to. You know, there are plenty of places in Scripture that we can point to this, where we can think about people who had very little left except for hope. Our Isaiah passage describes just that. And the portion that we have today comes from what we know as 2nd Isaiah. Reed Carlson, who is a professor of biblical studies at Union Lutheran Seminary, says that this overarching theme of 2nd Isaiah, up to this point, has been concerned with the problem of the exile in the 6th century BCE. But chapter 55 begins to broaden that a bit, to move to general words of hope. Whether first articulated during the second period of the Babylonian captivity, or merely just literally during this time that is described here in 2nd Isaiah, these were really directed to a people who have seen the invasion of their homeland, the imprisonment of their king, the destruction of their temple. Through the prophet, God has promised these refugees and their descendants comfort and redemption and a triumphant return to the land of their ancestors. These words remind them that they can rely on God's promises. Just as rain provides nourishment for the seeds, God's love provides hope to them. And that love will be a sign, an everlasting sign. That's really what that means. They are to hold on to that, even in the midst of struggle. Now, we aren't refugees. We haven't been exiled or forced from our homes. But first of all, there are moments when we lose hope and wonder if what we do really matters. There are moments of despair in our lives when we feel like we are barely hanging on. And second of all, there are refugees right here in our midst. There are exiles among us. There are those who have been pushed to the side, and certainly there is need for hope all around us. And so I wonder, what if we noticed that? The last line of Jesus in this passage today, in our gospel lesson, is an invitation. Let everyone with ears listen. That, my friends, is not just someone trying to make sure that we hear instructions. That is an invitation into engagement, into a life of scattering seeds. It means that if we take seriously our call to be followers of Christ, then we have a job to do, to scatter those seeds without worrying about where they land exactly, but knowing that some will make a difference. Our call to be an everlasting sign, to toss grace and hope and love around like we have more than we could ever need. And we do that because the truth is, we do have more. We have more than enough. And friends, that's what we are called to do, to seek out ways that we can do that and to trust that there is always more. That's our call, and as always, it is our good news for today and for every day. May it be so.